I mean, what inspired me to get into fiction, that after the 81 uprising in Brixton, I like to call it an uprising, me and my friends. I was sitting in a prison cell and I just read during the 4 months of my sentence. And I remember I was reading all these American guys, people like Steinbeck, people like Chester Himes, people like that. And then I wanted to explore something writing of my own community. If anybody did that, and I was looking, I was searching a library high and tail, couldn't find anything. And so that was one of the main reasons why I decided that someone like me deserves a place in fiction, and to be in the bookshops in Brixton or Clapham or wherever I'd live at the time. And I just wanted to ask you what made you decide to write about a particular side of London that you specialise in.
Well, I think it's a little different because obviously I don't have the same thing as you, and my kind of people are obviously well represented on the bookshops. I wrote that more like a middle class experience in North London because that's more what I'm familiar with. So it wasn't so much about filling a gap, but even though there are books that are by people like me, there's no one who's exactly like me. There's no one who's got my experience who's said the things that I want to say. So I guess it's a similar thing of wanting to express myself, wanting to get my opinion out there. Yeah. And it's sort of a similar motive, but I guess from a different perspective, because for me it's saying something different from what all the other middle class white guys have said are already on the shelves.
And your work is contemporary?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I go into bookshops all the time, we were discussing this earlier, and there's very, very few contemporary London novels around.
Yeah.
What do you think that is?
For this...
Well, I actually wrote an article for The Independent recently about some writers said, why are there not enough State of Nation novels set particularly in London at the moment? And my argument was that they are being written and they are being published, but they're not really being reviewed and they're not really sort of selling that well for whatever reason. And I think there's quite a few reasons for it, but I don't think it's that no one's interested in reading about the experience of being here. It's just that for some reason I think reviewers tend to be more interested in historical novels, and if you look at sort of competitions, it tends to be set overseas or in the past. And I think I interviewed a few authors, people like Martin Amis, and they were saying that it's hard when you're in a time to sort of write about it and people to recognise it. It only sort of serves its purpose later. That's when people sort of start to sort of see the whole. But I think you have to try, and I think if you're interested in writing about where you are, then there's no better place to be. I moved here in 1985, and it's just when the second lot of riots were all taking place. And like you, I noticed there weren't many books that seemed to reflect my experience, which is probably sort of halfway between the two of you. I should sit in the middle, really. Because I was living in squats and sort of hanging around with a lot of sort of unemployed and junkies and stuff, but we weren't really rioting, we weren't getting out of bed in time, really. But I did find that people weren't... there weren't many books that seemed to sort of describe the life that me and my friends were living, so that's why I really wanted to write about it. And then in the early 90s, people like Irving Welsh came along and did a great job, but I don't particularly like that sort of, I call it fairly phonetic style. I just thought you could describe sort of what's happening in sort of Whitechapel or Archway or wherever, that you can make it quite sort of poetic as well. So that's what I was trying to do, and it took me a long time to get a publisher to understand what I was doing.
Yeah, me too. I remember I went to this literature agent in Chelsea Harbour with my first manuscript, and I didn't know anything about publishing, so it was a handwritten manuscript in biro, and I had coffee stains and cigarette burns and spliff burns and God knows what else, and jam on my manuscript, and I walked in there cocky with my Brixton strut, and I placed it on this desk of this typist receptionist. She had her headphones on and all that. And I said, would I be able to make about 50 grand from this? And she looked at me like I was nuts. I thought she was going to call the police. And then she told me that in a very kind voice that I had to take it back and type it up. And I said, well, can't you do that? if I give you a cut of the advance. But she said no. So I had to learn to type and all sorts. But I remember I read somewhere that Stephen King got about over 50 rejections.
Yeah, he got a lot.
And so I thought, okay, I'll wait till I get over 50 and then I might think about giving up. Yeah. But I was very naive. I thought, what are you talking about? This is brilliant. Because you're always told not to phone up publishers. Yeah. But I kind of ignored that. Yeah. I would ring him up and say, well, what do you think of my book? and they would say, oh, well, blah, 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 and I'll cuss and swear down a phone and whatever. So what's your own individual stories about getting publishing?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the same sort of, I didn't do quite the same thing, but it was a similar sort of thing. You just send it off, you get rejected, you keep going. I got lucky because Legend Press, who now my publisher, they run a prize called the Luke Bitmead Writers Bursary. It's for new writers, unpublished writers, and I entered my manuscript for that, and it won the contest, and that the prize was a publishing contract. So, but before that, I'd been obviously, I'd written another novel before that, and I'd been sending it around. But I think there are more and more things out there like these new, prizes for unpublished writers, like the Legend Press one. There's a couple others. So there's a few gaps in there, but it's still tough to break in. You still need a bit of luck or a bit of a break. Mark, what was your...
Quite similar to Alex, actually. I first sent off something when I was about 22, a Serpent's Tail. This was in the late 80s. And I got a really nice letter from the guy who was there, Giles, someone, I can't remember his name now, but it was really encouraging. So it's not quite there yet, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't believe him. I was quite sort of aggressive and arrogant. I was like, no, they're all wrong. I was getting all his letters back, and I'm like, no, you're all wrong. And I finally got myself an agent, and he said, okay. And he said, because of the subject matter was sort of squats and drugs, he said, you should write a thriller. And I didn't really want to write a thriller. He just thought that's the road I should be going down. So I wrote this thriller, and I handed it in, and I thought, this is perfect, and he said, this is really good, where's the rest of it? I said, that's the novel. And he said, but there's only 30,000 words here. So I said, well, how many words are in a novel? I mean, I literally had no idea that it's like 70 to 90 or 100,000. So that's how naive I was. And so I lasted with him a couple of years, and then I got another agent, and I just found I wasn't getting very far. And I started having to take on board what agents are saying. And I thought, well, even if they're all wrong, then they're all saying the same thing. So I have to just stop being so aggressive and arrogant and actually listen. And even today, I probably think they're all 100% wrong. But I've had to sort of adapt and develop.
Yeah.
I think what helps me was reading a lot of other writers, not particularly about London now, but just sort of classics that I never thought I would enjoy. People like Dickens and Bronte, and I thought, why not? I can read these people, and I got a lot out of them, and I realised they have a long way to go.
Yeah, I was the same thing. I read. In fact, people often like to compare my work to other black writers, but I don't think that's so much is true, because I compare my work with writers more like Alan Soletto or John Osborne, the angry young men of the 50s. I compare my work more to them because it's gritty, it's urban, it's all those things. It's family dynamics, it's all that.
Yeah.
So I think I'm coming more from that kind of line of literature rather than the next Zadie Smith or anything like that.
I think publishing likes to pigeonhole people. They like to say, oh, you're black, so you're like this guy, or Monica Ali is like, they put you in boxes, and I think that's part of what you're talking about the lack of representation, because a lot of the publishing world is fairly privileged, the people who are in it. I mean, to even get to work in a publisher, you've got to sort of work for free for like a year, and that means that the people who do it have got to be somehow supported, like by their parents.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's a sort of a natural limiting thing. So I think
that was definitely the case when I went to HarperCollins with my second work. I was walking around in all these middle class sallies. It was quite overwhelming.
Yeah.
It was, and I found the whole promotion thing a bit. I feel like I started off with a very small publisher called Black Amber, and that was run by a lovely Jamaican woman called Rosemary Hudson. And she took a chance on me, and she had some really bright ideas. My first novel was called Bricks and Rock, and so she decided to get the Sticker Rock made. I think she had ordered about 5,000 of them, and so when you bought a copy of Bricks and Rock, you got Sticker Rock too. And that really lifted me up, really got me going.
Yeah.
And then Bricks and Rock started to do well, and then the big boys started to take notice, all those people who rejected me.
Yeah.
And they kind of dangled the money in front of my eyes. I thought, ooh. And so I signed with HarperCollins, and then I realised that I had an appointment with the marketing whatever lady, and she only had 2 minutes. And he said, "Oh, I'm going to send your book to Radio 4 and this and that and blah blah," and that was it. And so really, I was kind of doing my own promotion, because they were concentrating on the bigger bigger fish in their pool. And so I'm kind of glad that I've gone back to small publishing now, where at least they can concentrate on me, and we can work together and build up some kind of publicity.
Yeah, I mean, me and Andrew are on the same publisher, Legend Press, and we've got a lot of advantages. They're a real London publisher. A lot of the books are about London. They also look at stuff on spec, which most publishers don't. And I actually approached them with Firehose as my first book, just because I realised that Tom lived about a mile away from where I lived, and I thought, I could go for drinks with him and stuff, never really thinking it would actually happen, and it did. And he was very positive, and he got behind me, and because they're quite small, you can talk to them about changing the cover and about marketing, how you're going to do all that. And you've got a lot more time with a small publisher. They have to be more inventive in how to do market. Yeah? So they can't just sort of say at Waterstones, all right, it's £20,000 piece in the front. You have to sort of be a bit more creative in how you do it. And I did feel that Legend was sort of asking me for quite a lot of ideas, and a part of me thought, well, I'm a writer, I'm not a marketer, but I think you just, now the way things are going, you have to sort of have some idea about it, really.
I think so. The way things are going, because we've lost Borders.
Yeah.
And that used to be one of the stores that really supported me in my early career. Now they've gone, you can only rely on Waterstones, and Waterstones, so far in my career, they've been not so good with me. And so we have to invent other ways. I know writers now who are going on tour with maybe 2 actors, and they're doing the little play about the books, or posting stuff on YouTube and things like that, just to get the public's attention. And I think that's going to be more and more is going to happen in the future, because there's the outlets to actually promote your book are just narrowing.
It's a shame, because a lot of the reason why people want to be a writer is because they want to sit at home and write. If you're going to sit at home and write 100,000 words, it's probably because you like sitting at home and writing. You don't like going out and coming up with a play and going and doing YouTube videos and all that sort of thing. But I think you're right; it's necessary these days, because even the big publishers like HarperCollins, like you say, they might give a big splash for what they've decided is going to be the hit of the year, but they've got to hold it out of the writers who are not getting a big splash. Legend Press are great. They do a really good thing, but you've got to get involved, and you've got to be, they don't have the big budget to go on. Like Mark said, just pump down 20 grand to get you some nice promotion. I want to ask you about your motivation for for writing the books you do. I mean, because your books a lot about Brixton, not all of them, obviously. But I mean, did you want to write about Brixton and tell that story, or did you want to write about a guy called Biscuit who does his? Is it the characters, or is it the actual the setting?
Basically, I just wanted to tell the story of me and the friends who I had in Brixton back in those turbulent days of late 70s to early 1980s. That was so really changed my life. I mean, obviously, I ended up in prison because of the riots, and I just wanted to try and document that in fiction, because I came across such fabulous, incredible characters in my time in Brixton. Like, for instance, the wise Rastaman in East of Acre Lane, I based him on my cellmate, who beat me up. Who beat me up because I was cocky and arrogant, and I thought he'd be no problem because he was 50 odd, and I could, he was this really serious Rastaman, and he wouldn't eat the prison food, and that caused all kinds of problems, if you know what I mean, in terms of diarrhea and whatever. And I got tired of that, so me and him had a roll, and he beat the living crap out of me. And a day after, he took me to the prison library and got me out CLR James, the Black Jacobins, and he said, read that.
Wow.
And so my kind of education really started from that, and I started to really heavily read. And so when it comes to building characters, I grabbed him in a different kind of light, but I grabbed him, and it was like on the streets. There was this drug dealer who used to go around with these pair of nunchucks, and that was his tool of choice. So everyone crossed him, looked Kong like that, and I thought, okay, I'll grab him. He could be a character. And that's so really, I like to call my kind of work social realism, because I'm using reality, but I'm just kind of forming it into fiction.
And that era was really quite an exciting time. It's quite funny being in 2010, where you sometimes feel like a bit of deja vu, riots are starting to happen, and Tories and cuts and all that, and think, will it ever get like it did in the mid-80s, where a few times I thought, God, this is getting quite exciting now. I was sort of in class war, and I got quite involved in quite a lot of the rioting, but we tend to just sort of parachute into areas rather than